24 Alpha 19 Echo. We are terribly disappointed because Beatrice. Okay, so just in case, we just want to get some more work done. Let's just say that. So I was gonna do the text since it's raining now, but maybe you can't even hear that. Okay, but I want us to be able to read it together. We like that. So listen, we've got this drive from Weißenstein, Austria, Österreich, German, to Augsburg, Deutschland. So we got 54 minutes together, so that's fun. And you wouldn't have clicked if you weren't excited about that. All right, we're a few beers in. We weren't going to actually do this. So here, this is a very exciting section. We're on page 94 of Steven Pinker, Rationality, what it is, why it seems scarce, why it matters. And he's told us about, on page 74, how Leibniz was all like, yo, we gotta make our reasonings tangible. And you know, make it so that we can formulate them, so that we can find our error at a glance. And when there are disputes among persons, we can simply say, let us calculate without further ado to see who is right. That has to be true. So Pinker's going to tell us that it isn't. We saw on page 94, he said, why don't we say, let us calculate and see who is right? We are not living in Leibniz's utopia, and as with other utopias, we never will. There are at least 3 reasons. I'm going to get to those reasons, but can I just tell you what I think? I hope you did buy the book. But I suppose you're here. I mean, you could just go buy the book. Like, if you think this channel is just about passing on information, incorrect. All right. So Pinker will hopefully address what I'm about to say and convince me. But I imagined two kinds of physical written representations of discussions that could be evaluated once it's sketched out. One, from classic, logic and philosophy and all that stuff, is an argument. So you have the premises and you have a conclusion. Now that I say that, I remember that Pinker said, and as I've always said, although I didn't know this word, but that all of our arguments are enthymemes. They are never actually valid and sound. I don't even believe we really do arguments. I do think we're capable of it, though. And yes, no way that a human brain could actually make a valid and sound argument for anything important. Okay, yeah. But still, by making an argument, by doing a formal reconstruction, he said on page 87, but the habit of formal reconstruction, even if carried out part way, can often expose fallacious inferences and unstated premises which would otherwise lie hidden in any argument and is well worth cultivating. So yeah, anytime we're having a serious conversation, let's get out a pen and paper and let's distinguish these premises by assigning some language and some numbers to the thoughts, or to the justifications, because we're about to get to the thoughts, but to the justifications, or to the premises. And then we can see, okay, there's this error, that error, and that error. And then if we compare it to someone else's argument, I guess, so is Pinker going to say that, like, it's infinite? Since we're never going to have a perfectly valid and sound argument, there's always going to be something to find wrong with the argument. And you can't say, oh, well, I found more wrong in this argument than in that argument. Well, you can, but that doesn't mean much, because in all that unknown stuff, like suppose you found three things wrong with one argument and 2 things wrong with another. The person fixes, in the first case, one of the things, and it produces 2 more things. 2 more, reveals 2 more problems. So whatever numbers you're at when you evaluate the arguments in their first forms, that doesn't tell you what the actual error ratios are. I hear that, if that's what you're gonna say. I guess I have a hopeful it, but I don't actually have a response other than, yeah, I accept that. Okay. If that's what you're gonna say, then I will accept it. Well, we'll see. But anyway, so okay, I see I see a potential problem with calculating arguments. Maybe an AI could. No, but yeah, it's still like, yeah, that's tricky. Okay. Now here's the other thing. What about a voice map? All right, let's talk about 2 kinds of voice maps. I mean, it maps. Let's talk about an it map that's based on a scan, and that's not going to be for another well over 100 years. But at some point, we'll be able to do a scan of the brain and see the mechanisms that interacted to produce the conclusion. But now we can maybe speculate. Maybe, I see, maybe there's not even any point in that. Not that you know what an it map is, Pinker, but because even if you, working backwards from a person's conclusion and some of the premises that they give and some of their other behaviors, if you try to construct a map of their system, so you've got like, oh, this if-then mechanism has taken this condition from the senses and then is slapping that it, and then that it's done is that it, and there's probably this other it, and we can guess that maybe this one is outweighing, is surlivering that one, but it's all just guessing. But what about when we can do scans then? That doesn't actually, I see, that wouldn't actually tell us how a person's knowledge is wrong. It would just tell us that, oh, they got to this conclusion through these mechanisms, which clearly don't actually apply, and so we can call those biases or fallacies, whatever, which kind of undermines their arriving at the conclusion they arrived at, and so we can say we don't trust their arrival at that conclusion. It doesn't actually tell us whether or not the conclusion is true or not, just tell us whether or not their belief is justified by within them. Because I guess you could say their belief, whether their belief is justified, period. Because even if there's information justifying that truth outside, if they don't have it, it doesn't justify their belief. Okay. I'm not ready to read yet. I'm sort of struggling a little bit with this idea that right, no, but okay. So, okay. All right, I hear you. So we can't do sort of an absolute evaluation and calculation. Okay. That said, we can use voice maps and arguments to just guide us. And we might go in the wrong direction. We might say that argument is more flawed than that one, therefore we're going with the second one, and that might be wrong. And it was just a problem with the argument, not a problem with the conclusion. But isn't it better than what we're doing now? Where either we're saying I'm right and everybody else is wrong and that's the end of it, I don't have to justify shit, or we're saying you can't prove you're right about that. There's lots of truths to you that might be true for those reasons, but for me this other thing is true for these reasons, and for some reason your reasons are part of one reality and my reasons another, and so they're equally valid. Okay. All right, let's see what's going on. Let me pause. I'm gonna go pee. Okay, so Alpha 20 Foxtrot. I think I just yapped a bit in the first 13 minutes, and and then I ran off because I saw someone that I was hoping to see. Okay. All right, so we're on page 94 of Steven Pinker, Rationality, What It Is, Why It Seems Scarce, Why It Matters. And, well, no, this is the same video, so you just listen to me. I don't need to give you context again. Let's go. Section, Logical versus Empirical Truths. One reason there are at least 3 reasons. One reason logic will never rule the world is the fundamental distinction between logical propositions and empirical ones, which Hume called relations of ideas and matters of fact, and philosophers call analytic and synthetic. To determine whether all bachelors are unmarried is true, you just need to know what the words mean, replacing bachelor with the phrase male and adult and not married, and check the truth table. But to determine whether all swans are white is true, you have to get out of your armchair and look. If you visit New Zealand, you will discover the proposition is false because the swans there are black. It's often said that the scientific revolution of the 17th century was launched when people first appreciated that statements about the physical world are empirical and can be established only by observation, not scholastic argumentation. There is a lovely story attributed to Francis Bacon. That's really important. So, at least in the Western world, we'll say from the 17th century, the certain, I don't know what to call the people who are actually sort of doing the best thinking, the latest thinking, that are not the intellectual Luddites. So we'll call them the pioneers, I guess. So since the 17th century, the pioneers have understood, or have at least appreciated, that statements about the physical world are empirical and can be established only by observation, not scholastic argumentation. Yeah, I guess humans just didn't understand that before. Hence why all the classic philosophers always talk about a priori stuff and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what? Not sure whether that's relevant. Felt, okay, anyway, let's listen to this lovely story attributed to Francis Bacon. In the year of our Lord, 1432, and in the year of us humans, 11,432, there arose a grievous quarrel among the brethren over the number of teeth in the mouth of a horse. For 13 days the disputation raged without ceasing. All the ancient books and chronicles were fetched out, and wonderful and ponderous erudition, such as was never before heard of in this region, was made manifest. At the beginning of the 14th day, a youthful friar of goodly bearing asked his learned superiors for permission to add a word, and straightway, to the wonderment of the disputants, whose deep wisdom he sore vexed, he beseeched them to unbend in a manner coarse and unheard of, and to look in the open mouth of a horse and find answer to their questionings. At this, their dignity being grievously hurt, they waxed exceeding wroth, and joining in a mighty uproar, they flew upon him and smote him, hip and thigh, and cast him out forthwith. For, said they, surely Satan hath tempted this bold neophyte to declare unholy and unheard of ways of finding truth, contrary to all the teachings of the fathers. Wonderful. Lovely indeed. Now, this event almost certainly never happened, and it's doubtful that Bacon said it did, but the story captures one reason that we will never resolve our uncertainties by sitting down and calculating. That's not something that we thought of. Right, because you have empirical truths, obviously. Okay. But I thought that's what was included in calculating. Like, you see a premise establish all swans are white. I see. But it's not, it doesn't, I see. No, that can't count as calculating. You need calculating and investigating. Okay. Um, yeah. But, Eris is empiricism and reason. So when I saw calculate, I wasn't thinking about just reason. I was thinking about empiricism as well. But yeah, I see how calculating can only sort of refer to empiricism. But that doesn't mean that we can't like, look, we have the statement all swans are white. We ask everybody in the room, where y'all been? And let's say we have some well-traveled men among us and women among us, and nobody, not a single woman here or a man, thinks that has seen a black swan, and they're pretty well traveled. Maybe we don't even know how much of the earth is untraveled, but look, with that information, can't we go, yo, let's give that a check? Let's calculate that as, but I guess that's not calculating. Okay. But it's about probability, and what was the other word he taught us? Propensity. Probability is our judgment of the other things' behavior or future behavior, or unknown behavior, unknown to us. And the propensity is the likelihood of that thing actually doing that thing. All right. So we might not know the propensity of swans being black, but we can estimate a probability on our experience. Yeah, we can calculate a probability based on our experience, even if we can't calculate the propensity. Carrying on. So section 2, formal versus ecological rationality, and I accept section 1, logical versus empirical truths. Yeah, you can't Yeah, of course, Leibniz, you can't calculate when information doesn't exist just in the mind. Those are just representations of the information that you need to go out there and get. You can't just, okay, of course, sure, okay. Very good. Formal versus ecological rationality. A second reason Leibniz's dream will never come true lies in the nature of formal logic. It is formal, blinkered from seeing anything but the symbols and their arrangement as they are laid out in front of the reasoner. It is blind to the content of the proposition, what those symbols mean, and the context and background knowledge that might be mixed into the deliberation. Logical reasoning in the strict sense means forgetting everything you know. A student taking a test in Euclidean geometry gets no credit for pulling out a ruler and measuring the two sides of the triangle with equal angles, sensible as that might be in everyday life, but rather is required to prove it. In the same way, students doing the logic exercises in Carroll's textbook must not be distracted by their irrelevant knowledge that puppies can't talk. The only legitimate reason to conclude that the lame one failed to say thank you is that that's what is stipulated in the consequent of a conditional whose antecedent is true. Eris, the text for that to remind viewers who, especially viewers who didn't watch that. Page 75. All right, continuing, page 96. Logic, in this sense, is not rational. In the world in which we evolved, and most of the world in which we spend our days, it makes no sense to ignore everything you know. It does make sense in certain unnatural worlds, logic courses, brain teasers, computer programming, legal proceedings, the application of science and math to areas in which common sense is silent or misleading. Yes. And those would be examples of aspects of that qualify this time as a demand period, or those would be some those who qualify as demands that we didn't have. Um, they're pretty prevalent demands, so making logic a pretty big deal because there's a lot of unnatural worlds or aspects of our world now. But in the natural world, people do pretty well by commingling their logical abilities with their encyclopedic knowledge, as we saw in chapter 1 with the sand. We also saw that when we add certain kinds of verisimilitude to the brain teasers, people recruit their subject knowledge and no longer embarrass themselves. True, when they are asked to verify if a card has a D on one side, it must have a 3 on the other, they mistakenly turn over the 3 and neglect to turn over the 7. But when they are asked to imagine themselves as bouncers in a bar and verify if a patron is drinking alcohol, he must be over 21, they know to check the beverages in front of the teenagers and to card anyone drinking beer. The contrast between the ecological rationality that allows us to thrive in a natural environment, so APVDP, and the logical rationality demanded by formal systems is one of the defining features of modernity. Studies of unlettered peoples by cultural psychologists and anthropologists have shown that they are rooted in the rich texture of reality and have little patience for the make believe worlds familiar to graduates of Western schooling. Wow, cool. Here, Michael Cole interviews a member of the Capelli people in Liberia. Cute. Flumo and Yakbalo always drink rum together. Flumo is drinking rum. Is Yakbalo drinking rum? A. Flumo and Yakpalo drink rum together, but the time Flumo is drinking the first one, Yakpalo was not there on that day. Q. But I told you that Flumo and Yakpalo always drink rum together. One day Flumo is drinking rum. Was Yakpalo drinking rum? A. The day Flumo was drinking the rum, Yakpalo was not there on that day. Q. What is the reason? A. The reason is that Yakpalo went to his farm on that day and Flumo remained in town on that day. The Capelli man treats the question as a sincere inquiry, not a logic puzzle. His response, though it would count as an error on a test, is by no means irrational. It uses relevant information to come up with the correct answer. Educated Westerners have learned how to play the game of forgetting what they know and fixating on the premises of a problem, though even they have trouble separating their factual knowledge from their logical reasoning. Many people will insist, for example, that the following argument is logically invalid. All things made of plants are healthy. Cigarettes are made of plants. Therefore, cigarettes are healthy. Change cigarettes to salads, and they confirm that it's fine. Philosophy professors who present students with contrived thought experiments, like whether it is permissible to throw a fat man over a bridge to stop a runaway trolley which threatens 5 workers on the track, often get frustrated when students look for loopholes, like shouting at the workers to get out of the way. Yet that is exactly the rational thing one would do in real life. What an interesting, great point. And because you have heard me make this almost this exact complaint when I present the trolley dilemma to people. I've never heard anyone suggest shouting, or maybe I have, I don't know. It's been years and years that I've been having these conversations. Um, oh no, because in my example, they're always strapped to the tracks. That's why I've never heard somebody suggest that they just shouting at them. But yeah, and that's why they have to be strapped to the tracks. Because if you say that they're workers, you're gonna have to spend a few minutes with the people you're talking to, just absolutely insisting you gotta yell at the workers. So you gotta remove that option. That's so fun. Okay, but that is exactly the rational thing one would do in real life. So what's I mean, okay. What's the point though? That's exactly what they're there for. Oh, he's just talking about how they have these make-believe worlds familiar to graduates of Western schooling, as it says at the bottom, page 96. The Capelli have little patience for it, as is the case with um, basically anybody outside of philosophy. But the thing is that those people outside of philosophy, those people that I'm having trouble with in the trolley conversation, I can almost guarantee they have some belief that is not at all justified by their experiences and information. Um, so yeah, for the trolley dilemma, they may have no patience for it, but then they're going to be all like, "Oh, let's have an interesting, deep conversation about how we might define God." About higher powers and all that stuff. And when they say higher powers, they're not talking about gravity or light or entropy or anything like that. They're talking about some anthropomorphic magic. All right, carrying on. The zones in which we play formal, rule governed games, law, science, digital devices, bureaucracy, have expanded in the modern world with the invention of powerful, content blind formulas and rules. But they still fall short of life in all its plenitude. Leibniz's logical utopia, which requires self inflicted amnesia for background knowledge, not only runs against the grain of human cognition, but is ill suited for a world in which not every relevant fact can be laid out as a premise. All right, let's break that down. So, what do I think about that? Leibniz's logical utopia runs against. Oh, good boy, buddy. All right. So yes, it runs against the grain of human cognition. But that's not a reason for anything. I don't. I mean, for some things, yeah, but gosh, the grain of human cognition isn't taking us the right way. So it's okay if we, okay, and we have to do it anyway for law, science, digital devices, and bureaucracy. Okay. So that's that. But it's also Leibniz's logical utopia, which requires self-inflicted amnesia for background knowledge. Does it? I mean, okay, forget Leibniz's logical utopia. What about Eris's eristic utopia, where people exercise empiricism, reason, imagination, and skepticism, especially of self? Um, what about that utopia? No, we can't. I mean, I don't know why we're saying we can't lay out every relevant fact. I understand that it's virtually impossible or very difficult, but actually, virtually, like an AI could probably do a pretty darn good job of listing out of. I mean, I don't see why we're saying we can't do it. And in no world can every relevant fact be laid out as a premise. He doesn't mean just this world, right? All right. I mean, this world's just super complicated, so yeah, it'd be super hard. And I think we're looking at the rules sort of wrong. So, like, okay, so he says we have powerful content blind formulas and rules, and that's so. What's an example of a content blind formula or rule? Um, what about if you are speeding, then you get a ticket? That rule exists, but then its enforcers are not content blind, though. They are going to see the person and the type of car, and they're going to see a whole bunch of things relevant to the person they pulled over. And those things are going to be factored in uh, unreasonably into whether or not they get the ticket or they see someone peeing. There's that 9-year old, right, who was peeing outside and was arrested. Little black boy. So if we stop lying to ourselves and pretending that we are these robots, in the sense of being rational and so on, we are robots in the automatic sense, but um, if we didn't imagine ourselves as being so rational, we'd realize that a lot of these laws we just can't do because there's just in the law has to be included certain things about the victim, about the observers, about the committing of the act. I mean, the committer of the act, and about the brain that's evaluating it. So, if we had a formula that took into account the Leo, the suspect, the perp, allegedly, any potential victims, and any other potential observers, if we had a formula for how to deal with a quote unquote transgression. So we have our content blind transgressions, but then we have formulas on top of that that take into account other things. But yeah, it can't take into account everything, huh? I don't know. Something is shoping here, but I can't tell you what it is. So I am sort of forced to be like, all right, I guess. I'll give half a point for this one. For the first section, okay. Second one, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe when I'm editing, I'll have more thoughts. All right, let's move on to the third one. Classical versus family resemblance categories. A third reason that rationality will never be reduced to logic is that the concepts that people care about differ in a crucial way from the predicates of classical logic. Take the predicate even number, which can be defined by the biconditional. If an integer is even, it can be divided by 2 without remainder, and vice versa. The biconditional is true, as is the proposition 8 can be divided by 2 without remainder. And from these true premises, we can deduce the true conclusion 8 is even. Likewise, with a person, if a person is a grandmother, she is female, and the mother of a parent, and vice versa. And if a person is a bachelor, he is male, an adult, and not married, and vice versa. We might suppose that with enough effort, every human concept can be defined in this way, by laying out necessary conditions for it to be true. The first, if then, in the biconditional, and sufficient conditions for it to be true, the vice versa converse. This reverie was famously punctured by the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. Okay, we've never read Ludwig, heard great things about him, have a big crush on him, even though we don't know any of his work really. So we're taking this very seriously. Just try, he said, to find necessary and sufficient conditions for any of our everyday concepts. Okay, taking it less seriously because he seems to be saying that our mental faculties are going to make some point here that are going to show that it's not possible just because it's hard for us to do it. But I'm listening, Ludwig. Ludwig, what is the common denominator across all the pastimes we call games? Physical activity? Not with board games. Gaiety? Not in chess. Competitors? Not solitaire. Winning and losing? Not ring around the rosy or a child throwing a ball against a wall. Skill? Not bingo. Chance? Not crossword puzzles. And Wittgenstein did not live to see mixed martial arts, Pokemon Go, or Let's Make a Deal. The problem is not that no two games have anything in common. Some are merry, like tag and charade. Some have winners, like Monopoly and football. Some involve projectiles, like baseball and tiddlywinks. Wittgenstein's point was that the concept of a game has no common thread running through it, no necessary and sufficient features that could be turned into a definition. Instead, various characteristic features run through different subsets of the category the same way that physical features may be found in different combinations in the members of a family. Not every scion of Robert Kardashian and Kristen Mary Jenner has the pouty Kardashian lips, or the raven Kardashian hair, or the caramel Kardashian skin, or the ample Kardashian derriere. But most of the sisters have some of them, so we can recognize a Kardashian when we see one, even if there is no true proposition. If someone has features X, Y, and Z, that person is a Kardashian. Wittgenstein concluded that it is family resemblance, not necessary and sufficient features, that holds the members of a category together. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hear the claim. I'm not sure it was justified, but but I see how the justification given does sing. It sings for me. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I like that game thing. Very good, Ludwig. But can't it be like a checklist thing? And if it is a checklist thing, doesn't that no, but you're right. Like if you compare chess and Ring Around the Rosie, if you compare chess and a child throwing a ball against a wall, that said, Ring Around the Rosie and a child throwing a ball against the wall. I, I don't I don't know that those are games, bro. All right. Well, how would I define a game? I would define a game as an event with exceptional rules, some effort to uh like level the playing field. I feel like all games have that, right? Like you can't just bring in, there's no game where you can just, unless that's the game, see how many, where you can just like use whatever materials, take however much time you want, and like other people have to take less time or something like that. So it's the exceptional rules and the either limited time or materials. So there's some limiting thing to, if there are multiple players, to level the playing field, or if it's just you, then, or maybe you could say the rules have some limiting effect. So there are exceptional limiting rules. It's an event with exceptional limiting rules, and built into those rules some kind of means of either evaluation or reward, some kind of winning or losing. And because I'm rejecting Ring Around the Rosie and a child throwing a ball against the wall as games, I am rejecting that. So I think that I have given some common features of all games, but because of confirmation bias, I'm not really thinking of games that don't match that. Most of our everyday concepts turn out to be okay. Wait a second. Other thing is that yes, absolutely, we are not logical robots. So, and when I'm repeating that to say that language is not nearly as rational or as logical as we think that it is. It's an association thing. So it's does for any reason that activity or that item, that article, whatever, evoke this sound for me. Game. Je. Juego. So, and sometimes, yeah, that can be like, and yeah, the brain isn't like this perfectly organized system where we're going to reliably always attribute the word game to always attribute the word game to the same things. So yeah, but that would sort of just be us being a little bit wrong. If ever we needed to deal with something logically, then we would have to be like, okay, definitions matter. So Ring Around the Rosie, that might strike you as a game. That doesn't mean that it's useful to call that a game. Because, all right, right. So, okay. So, most of our everyday concepts turn out to be family resemblance categories, not the classical or Aristotelian categories that are easily stipulated in logic. These categories often have stereotypes, like the little picture of a bird in a dictionary next to the definition of bird, but the definition itself fails to embrace all and only the exemplars. Yes, okay, absolutely. The category of chairs, for example, includes wheelchairs with no legs, rolling stools with no back, beanbag chairs with no seat, and the exploding props used in Hollywood fight scenes which cannot support a sitter. Bro, that's a prop chair. That's not a chair, bro. That's a prop chair. Right? I see you're saying, oh, that's a subcategory of chairs. No, I don't think if we had to create the category of chairs, I think we would say, oh, by the way, if there's the word like prop or fake in front of it, that means it's not actually a member of the category. That's next to it. So if I dress up as a leprechaun on Halloween, I am a costume leprechaun. That is not a subcategory of being a leprechauns. I don't need to match any actual definitions. I just need to resemble. Even the ostensibly classical categories that professors used to cite to illustrate the concept turned out to be riddled with exceptions. Is there a definition of mother that embraces adoptive mothers, surrogates, and egg donors? If a bachelor is an unmarried man, is the Pope a bachelor? Stop it. Stop it. Either you include the connotation or you don't. Look, true. When you say bachelor, I'm imagining someone who is still engaging in intimate activities and who doesn't necessarily plan to stay a bachelor. I see a bachelor as sort of within the romantic or sexual sphere. It's the guys who are not yet or not currently in a marriage. The Pope is not at all in that sphere, bro. So if you replace bachelor with how did you define bachelor earlier? Uh, all right, so on page 98 we have if a person is a bachelor, he is male and adult and not married. And then before that, on page on page 94, to determine whether all bachelors are unmarried is true, you just need to know what the words mean, replacing bachelor with the phrase male and adult and not married. All right, so if that's how you want to define bachelor, then yes, the Pope is a bachelor. Now, if you know damn well that when you say the Pope is a bachelor, I'm going to be going, oh, that shopes, because I'm no longer using the definition we agreed on for a bachelor. I am now thinking of bachelor as someone who is interested in romance and sexuality and who pursues that interest. That's because I just changed the definition. That's why that shopes for me, because like we said, in human brains, words are just like associations, which is why we need to do this logic stuff to reveal that, as you have said, Pinker, in the past. So let's say we ask the question: if a bachelor is an unmarried man, is the Pope a bachelor? And let's say a human brain goes, "Whoa, no, a Pope isn't a bachelor." Then you say, "Okay, so that shows you're having a bad reaction to that." But that's why we need to be super clear about our definitions. I'm defining bachelor as a male, adult, unmarried. Now, is the Pope male, adult, and unmarried? The person says yes. Okay. So if we limit ourselves to that as the definition of bachelor, would it be technically correct to say that the Pope is a bachelor? The person will squirm and say yes. What about the male half of a monogamous couple who never bothered to get the piece of paper from City Hall? Then, uh, how did you define unmarried? Was it being non-monogamous? Because if you define married as monogamous, and so you define, um, then this man is married. Now, if you define married as having gotten a piece of paper from City Hall, then this man is by that definition, bachelor. What is the issue here? And you can get in a lot of trouble these days if you try to lay out necessary and sufficient conditions for women. Bro, what's going on? As if this weren't bad enough for the dream of a universal logic, this hasn't done shit for my dream of a universal heuristic system. Erizic system, because eristic already means something. It's the opposite of what we would love it like it to mean. So we're gonna that's what we're gonna do. Let's put that on the wall. Erizic. This way, for nobody knows what eristic means anyway, so that can just exit from the vocabulary, and we can reply it, you know what I'm trying to say, ace it with erizic. That's very good. And you know it's great because you have eris plus you have IC, bro. Right? And IC, y'all know what that means. I, spelled AYE, means like, I got you, bro. Like, I didn't believe what you were saying before, but now you have said something to convince me. And C means I didn't like agree with what you were saying before, but now you have said something to convince me. Um, so that's great. That's perfect because that is so important to an erizic dialogue. A nice dialogus. Okay, so you need some empiricism, some reason, some imagination, some skepticism, and the ability to hear and be convinced and go, I see. And C is spelled SI. But of course, obviously, of course, some of the stuff I come up with is just so genius that not only is it I C, well, here it's the letters I C or Rizik, and then it's also AYE, I, SI, C. And then it's also, of course, je vois, yo veo, I see, I understand, I see. Brilliant, 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 brilliant. That does that the word alone, I can die now. Okay, carrying on. And if this weren't bad enough for the dream of a universal logic, the fact that concepts are defined by family resemblance rather than necessary and sufficient conditions. Great. Concepts in the human brain, absolutely, defined by family resemblance. But when you need to then work with those concepts in law, science, bureaucracy, and so on, um, you can no longer just use the associations that exist in the brain. You have to now limit yourselves to certain things and agree on certain things. What is the issue? As if this weren't bad enough for the dream of a universal logic, the fact that concepts are defined by family resemblance rather than necessary and sufficient conditions means that propositions can't even be given the values true or false. This is just a very homocentric. That's what I think. Their predicates may be truer of some subjects than others, depending on how stereotypical the subject is. In other words, how many of the family's typical features it has. Everyone agrees that football as a sport is true, but many feel that synchronized swimming as a sport is, at best, truthy. The same holds for parsley as a vegetable, a parking violation is a crime, stroke is a disease, and scorpions are bugs. In everyday judgments, truth can be fuzzy. Yeah, because the human fucking brain is fuzzy, bro. I mean, it's not, but it's messy. And it's not that all concepts are fuzzy family resemblance categories. I'm not sure where to he put the emphasis on all. So, and I can't do italicize, unfortunately, with the font that I had chosen. So, it's not that all concepts are fuzzy family resemblance categories. I would have hoped that he would say it's not that all concepts are fuzzy family resemblance categories. It's that like psychological concepts are. Now, if you want to talk about, I mean, all concepts are psychological. So the things that they refer to are not fuzzy family resemblance things and also can be categorized more neatly. But yeah, our conceptualization is fuzzy family resemblance. People are perfectly capable of putting things in little boxes. Everyone understands that a number is either even or odd with no in betweens. We joke that we can't be a little bit pregnant or a little bit married. We understand laws that preempt endless disputation over borderline cases by drawing red lines around concepts like adult, citizen, owner, spouse, and other consequential categories. Right. 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 Laws preempt endless disputation over borderline cases by drawing red lines around concepts like adult, citizen, owner, and spouse. So sometimes that's what you have to do in law and science and so on. And in some botany might define a fruit as this, and in health nutrition might define a fruit as that, and to some a physicist or a somethingist that came on my feed on Instagram might define flat as this, and a topology and a topograph might define flat as that, and yeah, bro, yeah. Indeed, an entire category of informal fallacies arises from people being all too eager to think in black and white. There's the false dichotomy, nature versus nurture, America, love it or leave it. You're either with us or with the terrorists. Either you're part of the solution or you're part of the problem. There's a slippery slope fallacy. If we legalize abortion, soon we'll legalize infanticide. If we allow people to marry an individual who's not of the opposite sex, we'll have to allow people to marry an individual who's not of the same species. And the paradox of the heap begins with the truth that if something is a heap, then it's still a heap if you remove one grain. Um, but when you remove another and then another, you reach a point where it's no longer a heap, which implies that there's no such thing as a heap. By the same logic, the job will get done even if I put it off by just one more day, the mañana fallacy, and I can't get fat by eating just one more french fry, the dieter's fallacy. Um, Actually, those were all pretty clear as far as what the if then formulations would be of these different mechanisms. Um, I mean, the manana fallacy and the dieter's fallacy would just be like, if I do one more of this thing that requires a lot, um, sorry, if I do one more or don't do one, and the total is going to be a lot or need to be a lot to make a difference, then it's okay. That's the it. Wittgenstein's response to Leibniz and Aristotle is not just a debating point for philosophy seminars. Many of our fiercest controversies involve decisions on how to reconcile fuzzy family resemblance concepts with the classical categories demanded by logic and law. Is a fertilized ovum a person? Did Bill and Monica have sex? Is a sport utility vehicle a car or a truck? The latter classification put tens of millions of vehicles on American roads that met laxer standards for safety and emissions. And not long ago, I received the following email from the Democratic Party. House Republicans are ramming through legislation this week to classify pizza as a vegetable for the purpose of school lunches. Why? Because a massive lobbying effort of Republican lawmakers by the why? Because a massive lobbying effort of Republican lawmakers by the frozen pizza industry is underway. If this Republican Congress In this Republican Congress, almost anything is up for sale to the most powerful lobbyists, including the literal definition of the word vegetable. But this time, it's coming at the expense of our kids' health. Sign this petition and spread the word. Pizza isn't a vegetable. All right, so we'll leave it at that. Those are his three reasons. I'm going to give a big to the third one. So we're going to put a yod on that section header. The second one, yeah, and then the first one, yeah, but I don't think that changes the question overall. We just need empiricism as well as the calculations, but we can still have some kind of a thing where we do objective evaluations, even if they're not pen and paper only calculations. All right, there we go. I think that was fun. And Neil, thank you. You've been quite the sport.